I'm Anthony Roberts, the pastor of New Beginnings Church. I'd like to welcome you to our Deeper Wednesday Bible study. This is a time when our church family comes together virtually in order to study God's Word. Well, we have been in our Genesis message series for the past couple of weeks, and this past weekend we began to look at the life and the story of Joseph. Joseph is one of the significant figures in the book of Genesis. In fact, the remaining part of Genesis, really once you get beyond chapter 37, is about Joseph and his life and his story. And so we encounter Joseph as a young man who is loved by his father, not so well liked by his brothers, but we begin to even see in his difficult circumstances the hand of God upon his life. So this evening we're going to be revisiting Genesis chapter 37, verses 5 through 10. Here's what it says, reading out of the New International Version. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told this to his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you've had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come down and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. There's some things that we have to recognize about Joseph. First of all, Joseph was favored by his father and hated by his brothers. We know that Joseph was born to his parents in their old age. He was probably not expected. And so he came later on in life, and because of that, Joseph acquired a certain amount of favor from his brother, Jacob, because this little boy had been born to him in his old age. For those of us who have had children in an older age, that can be a blessing, especially when it's unexpected. So Jacob favored Joseph so much that he gave him a special robe to show his love. You might remember the Broadway play, Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Coat. He was given a special coat, a robe, and it was unique in the sense that it had sleeves. You see, if you worked out in the fields like Joseph's brothers, you had sleeveless robes because you were getting your hands, your arms dirty, dealing with animals and working the land. If you had sleeves on your robe, that meant that you didn't really get your hands dirty. You probably had more of a desk job. So no wonder the brothers were a little bit jealous of him. As a result of Joseph's favor that he had from his father Jacob, we know that he was not just disliked by his older brothers, but the Bible says he was hated by his older brothers because of how their father favored him. It probably didn't help Joseph, the fact that the Bible also says he had some tattletale tendencies. He tended to watch what the brothers were doing in the field, and when they were taking a bit too long of a break or not doing exactly what they should, Joseph would run back to dad and tell him what was going on. So there's a number of reasons that the brothers hated Joseph. We also have to understand that Joseph was a dreamer who had ridiculous dreams. This first dream that he has, that the Bible tells us about, were these sheaves of grain that the brothers are gathering together. They all stand up, and the older brothers, their sheaves of grain, bow down to Joseph's sheaf of grain, which is just an interesting vision when you think about it. And of course, the brothers were not happy with Joseph when he told them this dream. And they said, "If you think that we're going to bow down and, honor you, you got another thing coming." And then Joseph has this other dream where the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bow down to Joseph, symbolizing his brother, his brothers, his mother, and his father. When he tells his brothers and his father about this dream, the brothers hate him even more, and the father even rebukes Joseph. You see, Joseph's dreams weren't just ridiculous, they were upsetting. They upset the norm. The brothers and Jacob weren't too pleased with Joseph's dreams because if they came true, it would mean that things would be messed up. The way that things were supposed to work in that ancient Middle Eastern society where the old kind of ruled the young would be completely flipped upside down. So there's good reason why they're not too pleased with Joseph's dreams. But we also have to understand that Joseph's dreams came from God. And I really want us to understand that. God's name is not mentioned in this part of the story. And so one way to think about Joseph's dreams is that he had some really weird pizza the night before that gave him some strange dreams. But what is implied in this story is that Joseph's dreams came from God. Even though we don't hear God's name at this point in the story, it is clear that Joseph's dreams came from God. God put those dreams in Joseph's heart. You see, God places those dreams in Joseph's heart to prepare Joseph for his purpose on his life. Just like God can place a dream in our heart that may not make sense and may actually be ridiculous, and God places those dreams in our heart to prepare us for what he has called us to do. So here was the main point that we hit on this Sunday, and it's one that I think is a really powerful idea. Here it is. God-given dreams are the ones that only God can bring to fruition. A God-given dream is not something that we can bring about on our own. A God-given dream is not something that we can accomplish on our own and make it happen. A God-given dream, a God-given vision is one that only God can bring to its full completion. That excites me, that I don't have to take the dreams that God has placed in my heart and make them happen. If it's a God-given dream, God will make it happen. So there's three truths about God-given dreams that we must keep in mind. Number one, God-given dreams might seem completely crazy. The reality is that God-given dreams often don't make sense. Joseph's dream that he had did not make sense. Didn't make sense that he, as one of the youngest brothers, would somehow rule the other brothers and his father and his mother. It didn't make sense in that society. That's why they dismiss him. That's why they hate him. These dreams seem completely crazy. But here's the good news. God-given dreams make perfect sense to God even when they don't make perfect sense to us. Just like Isaiah 55:8 says, "For my thoughts," and this is God speaking, "for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord." Things might not make sense to us, but they make sense to God. The dreams that God places in our life might not make sense to us or those around us in the moment, but they make perfect sense to God. So God-given dreams might seem completely crazy. But we also have to understand that God-given dreams might sound completely impossible. You know, sometimes God drops a dream in our life and our immediate response is, that is not going to happen. That mountain is not going to move. That barrier cannot be overcome. These situations are what they are and there's nothing that can change them. But God will drop a dream in our life that seems completely impossible. And here's the truth of the matter. That dream might very well be impossible for us on our own. But the good news is that God-given dreams require God to act. When God puts a dream in our life, it's not because he's just expecting us to go out and figure it out on our own. It's because God is going to empower us along the way. You see, God places impossible dreams in our life so that he can bring them into being. Doesn't Matthew 19:26 say, with God, all things are possible? Not some things, not easy things, not things that are merely convenient, but with God, all things are possible. When God places a dream in our lives, he will make the impossible possible. So God-given dreams, they might seem crazy. They often are. God-given dreams might sound impossible. We might have no clue how exactly that's going to happen. But number three, we must understand that God-given dreams might feel a bit disruptive. A God-given dream might kind of seem like it's going to mess things up. You see, God-given dreams shake things up. They shake our reality. That's why we begin to feel a shift in the atmosphere when God begins to plant things in our life. You see, God-given dreams may upend what seems to be in concrete. Sometimes a God-given dream will upend the addiction that you've been dealing with your entire life. Sometimes a God-given dream will begin to break generational curses. Sometimes a God-given dream will take injustice and it will make justice come out of nowhere. A God-given dream may completely upend those things that we think are immovable. Why is that? It's because God is God, and God can disrupt some things to make his will come to pass. You know, as Proverbs 69 reminds us, we as human beings often plan our own course, but God establishes our steps. And when God establishes our steps, it doesn't matter what gets put in front of us. God will shake things up to make sure his will happens. So there's three questions that we need to be considering as we're reflecting on what the life of Joseph and his dreams tell us about the dreams that God puts into our own life. Here's the first question that I want us to ask. What dreams has God placed in our hearts? What dreams has God placed in our hearts? Some of our dreams might be big. Some of our dreams might be small. But God has placed certain dreams in our life. What are the dreams that God has placed in your heart? Here's the second thing. Do we trust that God will make the dreams that he put in our heart come to pass? You know, sometimes I find myself struggling to believe that God is actually going to do the things that he's speaking into my life because I have a limited vision. But part of what it means to be a faith-driven person is believing that even though this does not make sense to me, it seems impossible, it might even seem crazy disruptive, I believe that God can do it. Do you trust that God can bring the dreams that he put in your life to pass? Finally, this. Are you ready to obey God when he puts a dream in your life? You know, Joseph's ancestor was a guy named Abraham, who God came to one day and called him to leave everything that he knew. And he said, Abraham, I want you to go to a place that I'm going to show you. And by the way, I know that you're elderly and you and your wife have not been able to have children, but in your old age, you're going to have a child. Out of that child is going to become a mighty nation who's going to be a blessing to the world. It was an absolutely ridiculous vision that God is painting for Abraham. But Abraham obeyed, and as a result of God's favor and grace upon Abraham's life, Abraham experienced the beginnings of the fruition of that God-given dream. So let's remember, God-given dreams are ones that only God can bring to fruition. Now, you're not going to want to miss this Sunday's message because we're going to go right with Joseph into the pits of brokenness that sometimes we experience as human beings. And if we're being honest, there are moments when we feel like we can never get out of the pit and not even God can get us out. But what we find through the life of Joseph is that sometimes God works in unexpected ways and in difficult moments to continue to move his will forward. So I hope that you'll enjoy it, or rather join us in church this Sunday at 10:30 a.m. We would love to see you. We got a lot of great things going on in the New Beginnings Church family, and we want you to be a part of it. So God bless you. Have a great evening, and we hope to see you soon.